Good evening all, and welcome. Lights down, doors locked, phones on silent. Tonight I've got a fresh batch of haunted house stories to slip under your skin. These are slow burns with sharp edges, just the way we like it. Settle in, get comfortable, and let the dark do what it does best. My girlfriend and I rented a little Craftsman for a long weekend, one of those cozy places with a guest book full of glowing reviews and a note on the fridge that said, "Please do not open the owner's closet." It was a plain white door in the hall with a brass knob that didn't turn. We noticed it the first night because, at exactly 3:17 a.m., a soft light bled out from under it. Not bright, more like the blue glow of a TV in another room. Then came the sound of a late-night host laughing. We froze. We hadn't turned any TV on. I whispered, "It's power bleed," like that was a thing I understood. But once you hear footsteps behind a door that's supposed to be empty, weight shifting, a light scrape as if a chair was being pulled out, you stop pretending. You're not afraid. We slept with the hallway lamp on. The light under the door continued, faint, like a heartbeat. Next day, we wrote it off. New house noises. Maybe a motion sensor bulb. We went hiking. We came back tired and brave and decided to peek. The latch wouldn't budge. It was sealed. Second night, same ritual, 3:17 a.m., light and laughter. Only this time, it wasn't late-night TV. It was humming. Old commercial jingles. Someone clearing their throat. And then, knuckles rapped quick across the other side. 3 taps. Pause. 2 taps. I tapped back the same rhythm. There was a long, eager silence. Then the handle turned from the inside. We both ran to the kitchen and slept on the floor like kids, under a blanket, facing the hallway. The door was quiet until morning. That evening, we taped our phones to door frames with the voice recorder on. Whatever lives in recordings doesn't always live in rooms. Around 2 a.m., the footfalls came again, and my door opened with that polite creak an old hinge makes when someone doesn't want to wake you. We found nothing when we looked. The audio caught everything. A long, slow whistle one, and then a small voice, high and clear, singing off-key. We keep the marble in a bowl on the dining room table now. Once in a while, it's somewhere else in the morning, like the stairs or the top of the bookcase. We don't whistle anymore. 3. The wall that added a door. I moved into a studio with a strange quirk, a thin seam in the paint along one wall, like a very old doorway had been plastered over. The landlord called it character and said I could hang a tapestry. 3 months in, I woke at 4:12 a.m. to the sharp scent of fresh paint and the feeling of cold air moving where no air should move. The tapestry swayed. I stared and watched the seam breathe. I turned on the lamp and the plaster was damp. It was darker than the rest. When I touched it, the wall was pulsing like a truck was idling behind it. At 4:13 a.m., a narrow rectangle appeared. Lines of wet paint bowed outward and set. Not a full door, just the outline. On the floor, a strip of paint curled up like an old scab and dropped away, revealing wood. An actual sill. There were no hinges, no knob. And yet at 4:14 a.m., something knocked from the other side. For slow thuds that traveled upward, from floor to where a head would be. I ran to the hallway and banged on the neighbor's door. No answer. I called my sister and sat on the doormat until dawn, shaking. When the light came, the wall was normal. Dry, seamless. No sill. No tape on the floor. No evidence I hadn't dreamed the architecture. That evening, my upstairs neighbor cornered me in the stairwell, eyes bruised with exhaustion. "You heard it last night, right?" she asked. The door trying to remember itself? She had lived there for years. Every few months, she said, the building shifts. Old rooms try to come back. The stair that isn't there creaks. The dumbwaiter that was boarded up breathes. And once, back in 2019, the old servant entrance on my wall opened enough you could see into a space that no longer exists. She saw a dining room table set for guests. Empty chairs, plates, a folded note by the nearest wine glass. She reached through to grab it, felt a wrist grip her fingers from another century, and yanked back with a scream. She never tries to pull anything through anymore. She just waits while the house remembers itself, and then forgets. 4. The rental with the nightlight. We grabbed a cheap week-long rental out by the lake. It was spotless, almost sterile, like no one ever really stayed there. The listing said a caretaker lived in a carriage house out back. We never saw them. Every bedroom had a little nightlight plugged in. I'm not a nightlight person, but I left mine alone because it flickered if I touched it, like a moth trapped in glass. The first night, I adjusted my pillow and froze because the nightlight cast a shadow on the far wall that didn't belong to the furniture. It was a slumped figure in a chair. When I sat up, it vanished. When I lay down, it returned. I recorded it to convince myself I was being ridiculous. On video, there was no shadow at all. Only the light, and the soft reflection of my face in the outlet cover, eyes open and wired. Second night, my door shut quietly by itself at 3 a.m. Not wind. It clicked into the latch. A minute later, the nightlight dimmed and brightened twice like someone had pinched the bulb. Then that shadow leaned forward, stayed crouched like it was listening at the edge of my blankets. I whispered my girlfriend's name down the hall. She answered groggily. I turned the nightlight off, and it still glowed dim, like a dying ember. In that light, the shadow stood up from its invisible chair and raised a hand to its face. The gesture was ordinary and human, and somehow worse than anything, like it was wiping a nose. In the morning, I found a balled-up tissue under the nightstand. It smelled like old perfume and damp stone. We left after 3 nights. On the kitchen counter, under a magnet shaped like a lighthouse, was a note for guests. Please leave nightlights plugged in. They keep the old couple from wandering. M. 5. The wedding house. My cousin rented a historic home for her wedding party. 12 of us slept there. The brochure bragged about original woodwork in a lovely, private bridal suite. The suite had mirrored closet doors that ran the length of one wall. First night, the mirrors made all of us twitchy. You turned your head, and there were 6 of you. The house had 7 bedrooms. By 1 a.m., someone had draped towels over most of the glass. 2 of the bridesmaids fell asleep in the suite. Around 3 a.m., one of them woke to the sound of someone pacing. She assumed it was me, restless. When she checked her phone, I'd texted 40 minutes earlier from a different room. You awake? The pacing continued, but it didn't match footsteps. It was too rhythmic. The sound of silk moving, of fabric brushing wood, a dress swishing back and forth. She sat up and watched the towel on the mirror lift at the bottom, like a draft was blowing beneath it. Someone scraped a hanger along the closet rod and whispered, "No, no, no," like a prayer. She woke the other bridesmaid. They both sat there in the dark, holding hands and telling themselves it was the AC. Then the towel slid down the mirror and pooled on the floor. In the glass, their beds were empty. They ran. The mirrors showed no one running. Just an empty room and that slow swish of white along the baseboards. In the morning, we told the caretaker. She frowned and said, "Miss Abel's dresses are still in there." That's all she would say. When we opened the closet, there was nothing but cedar smell and a single yellowed veil folded on the shelf. During the ceremony, the scent of old lilies drifted through the house in a wave that made several guests sniff and glance around. The photographer's favorite picture? The one with a faint woman-shaped blur near the stairs, head bowed, veiling nothing. 6. The houseplant that wouldn't die. I took a cutting from a pot hose at a friend's funeral. It felt like a way to keep her around. I rooted it in a jar and potted it on a high shelf in my apartment. The leaves were shaped like hearts. It was sweet. A week later, there were leaves on my kitchen floor that didn't match any plant I owned. Pale, papery, heart-shaped leaves with little holes, like something had chewed perfect circles through them. Then the smell started: wet soil and something metallic, like pennies on your tongue. I moved the pot to a sunnier spot and told myself it was a simple fix. The plant grew more leaves overnight. Not fast like a time-lapse, literally overnight. I counted 8 new ones at breakfast, half open and glistening like they'd been licked. When I touched them, I heard a tiny wet pop, like suction releasing. I put it outside for a day. When I brought it back in, the roots had escaped the drainage hole and braided themselves into a neat line that led toward my bedroom door. There was dirt under the knob. I repotted the plant. The root ball was shaped like a fist. I swear to you it clenched. I yanked it free and found something tangled inside. A small metal locket. Inside was a picture of my friend at age 11 that I'd never seen. On the back, etched in jittery strokes, "Put me back where you found me." I returned the cutting to the cemetery. Somewhere between apology and nausea, I placed the pot on the grave, tucked the locket under the soil, and whispered her name. When I got home, dirt was tracked from my front door to the shelf where the plant had lived. A single, heart-shaped leaf lay on my pillow, damp and clean-cut, and the apartment finally stopped smelling like pennies. 7. The extra set of footsteps. We bought a tiny century-old house and noticed right away that walking from the front door to the kitchen made a certain pattern on the floorboards. Step, squeak, creak, sigh. We joked about it like it was the house saying hello. 2 weeks in, we started hearing an extra set. If I walked down the hall, something followed 3 steps behind. If my husband walked to the sink, it would track him and stop when he did. Always 3 steps. At night, the extra steps would do a lap around the bed and then stand by the window until dawn. We never saw anyone. No shadow, no breath on our faces. But you could feel a tension, like a dog waiting for a treat. We set a baby powder trap in the hallway. The next morning, there were prints. Not feet, not shoes. 5 teardrop shapes in a splay, like the pads of a large hand pressed into the floor. Each hand had only 3 fingers. We called my uncle, who'd be the first to laugh at us. He showed up with a pizza, rolled his eyes through our story, and then saw the prints for himself and went silent in a way that scared me worse than footsteps. He grew up in this town. He said the house was moved here in the 50s, and before that it was a farmhouse with a cellar that wasn't meant for food. There were men who hid there during raids, he said. Late in the war, men with burned hands. That night, we left the back door open. We turned off every light. We set the pizza box on the floor by the hallway and went to bed. The extra steps did their lap, stopped by the kitchen, and didn't move for a long time. When we checked in the morning, half the pizza was gone. There were no crumbs, and the powder was smooth. The extra set of footsteps still follow us, but now they never step closer than the kitchen threshold. We leave food on full moons. Call it ridiculous if you want. It's quieter in the house when we do. 8. The apartment over the laundrette. I lived above a 24-hour laundromat for a year. The machines were white noise. The smell of detergent was constant. It felt safe. There were always people below me. At night I'd lie on the couch and listen to quarters drop. Sometimes, around 2:30 a.m., all the machines would cut off for a second dead quiet, and then we're back in unison. It was weird but kind of soothing. Then, one night, the quarter sound started coming from my kitchen. Just a soft metallic clink, over and over. On the counter was a little stack of quarters. I don't keep change on the counter. I swept them into a drawer. The kitchen light buzzed and popped. The quarters rolled to the floor one by one, as if pushed. They all settled heads up. I went downstairs and asked the night attendant if they'd been having electrical issues. He said no, and the way he said it made my skin prick. He added, "Sometimes the old man comes at 2:30. There was a picture taped by the register of the previous owner, a thin guy with soft eyes. He'd died in the back office, folded over the coin machine. Heart attack. They found him at 2:30 a.m. That night, I put the quarters in a clear glass and set it by the sink. At 2:30 a.m., the apartment went silent. The glass shook. 3 quarters hopped out, neat as fish breaking water, and stacked themselves on the cutting board. Then nothing. I wrote a note on a receipt. "You forgot your change." I left it by the glass with the stack on top. The next morning, the quarters were gone and the note had a damp ring like a glass had been set on it. On the back of the note, in greasy pencil, someone had written, "Thanks. You should move your stove. The gas line isn't right." We called the landlord. The gas line was cracked. The repairman shook his head and said, "You're lucky." 9. The room off the stairs. When we toured the house, the realtor said, "Don't mind that tiny room mid-stairs. It's quirky, not functional." It was a half-height door at the landing, like a little reading nook under the eaves. Cute, if you like that sort of thing. We stored winter coats in there. The first cold snap, we opened it and found all the coats on the floor in a heap. We hung them back up. Next day, they were on the floor again. Okay, mice. Squirrel? We put traps. Nothing. Then, one night, we heard soft dragging from the little room, and our daughter, who had never sleepwalked in her life, stood outside it with her hand on the knob and said, "The small lady is cold." We brought her into our bed and made jokes we didn't feel. The next morning, a tiny handprint showed up on the dust of the landing window. Smaller than our daughter's. Older somehow, if that makes sense. Thin fingers. No palm. We left a little blanket in there. We closed the door. Each night, we heard it slide open with that cottony sound old wood makes. Each morning, the blanket was folded differently. Tight at first, then looser. Then, on a night when the heat went out, it was draped across the threshold like a welcome mat. We called a woman my aunt swears by. Not a priest, not a psychic. Someone who reads spaces. She walked in, frowned at the landing, and said, "There was once a stair that kept going, but they cut the house in half." She used to sit there and watch out the window for him to come home. He didn't. So she sits. My boyfriend filmed it. In the video, the hallway was correct. The portrait and wallpaper were missing. The blink was normal. But when you paused it, frame by frame, a man stood behind me for exactly one frame, hat in hand, head bowed. His mouth was a thin line that might have been a smile or a cut. We put a wooden chair at the landing and a small shawl over it. We tucked a wrapped bar of soap in the little room, my aunt's idea. The dragging stopped. Some nights we find the shawl over the back of the chair. Some nights we find it hung neatly on a coat hook, and we pretend we didn't see that the hook used to be higher. 10. The mirror from the estate sale. I bought an old mirror at an estate sale for $20, gilded frame, foxed glass, heavy enough to have a personality. The woman running the sale was quick to let it go. That should have been a clue. I hung it in the hallway. Every time I passed it, the hallway seemed a shade darker than it should have been. Not spooky dark, just thin. 3 days later, the mirror started showing details that weren't in my house. A framed portrait over my shoulder that I didn't own. A wallpaper pattern I'd never seen. And the tiniest glitch, my reflection would blink a half second after I did. We put a towel over the mirror. That night, the towel fell off twice. At 3 a.m., we woke to a soft scraping, like metal on plaster. The mirror had slid down the wall 3 inches and leaned out, as if peeking. We took it back to the estate sale house. It was empty. The lawn had a realtor sign sinking into it like a gravestone. I left the mirror leaning against the front steps with a note. "Thank you, but no." When we got home, the hallway smelled like old cologne and cold metal. On the wall where the mirror had hung, someone had written, very lightly, like a fingertip in dust, "You were almost in." 11. The basement with the hum. Our rental's basement had that classic unfinished vibe. Slick concrete, a single pull chain bulb, the scent of damp cardboard. The landlord kept a dehumidifier down there humming away. It was always full. The hum grew a melody over time. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. The compressor's drone shifted into a rise and fall that sounded like a lullaby. My wife could hear it too. We filmed it. On video, it was just hum. One night, while doing laundry, I heard the melody change. The lullaby stopped. The hum dropped lower and lower until the light barely glowed and the bulb flickered. That metal smell hit, and a wave of pressure built in my ears like I'd driven up a mountain in 30 seconds. I yanked the cord. Darkness. The hum continued, vibrating in my teeth. Then a whisper threaded in. "Don't let it in. Don't let it in." I ran upstairs and slammed the door. The hum got louder. The floorboards under the kitchen table trembled and then eased, like something had put a hand there and then taken it away. We called the landlord. He sighed and said the house used to be next to a river that was rerouted. "Sometimes it remembers the water," he said, like that explains ghosts. He replaced the dehumidifier anyway. The new one hummed too, faint and tuneless. It didn't matter. On rainy nights, the basement hums itself into a low, steady plea. Sometimes it says don't. Sometimes it says wait. And once, the week the creek behind the houses flooded its banks, it changed to a frantic, "Not yet, not yet, not yet," until the sirens started up, and we heard our neighbor pounding on doors in the dark, shouting that her husband had slipped into the water. We keep sandbags in the basement now, and we leave the door at the top of the stairs open when it rains. Call it superstition. The hum is calmer when we do. 12. The house with two front doors. The old row house we bought had two front doors side by side, one nailed shut since forever and painted to match the bricks, the other used like normal. People joked about it. We joked too, until we didn't. On our first week there, someone knocked on the sealed door at 11:28 p.m. 3 knocks, then a pause, then a long, slow raking sound, like a fingertip testing the seam between paint and wood. I watched the dead door while my husband stood at the living room window. "No one's on the stoop," he said. We ignored it because what else do you do? And the next morning there were scuffed marks on the threshold of the dead door like something had been dragged across it. That night, the knocks came again, paired with a whisper so low we barely heard it over our heartbeat. "Come on." We called our contractor to ask if the door led anywhere. He said the original builders put 2 doors for 2 families. Later owners merged the houses and sealed one. "There's still a vestibule on the other side," he said. "Like a little coffin of a room. We can open it if you want." We said no. We said absolutely not. We said do not open any dead rooms while we sleep here. That night, 11:28 p.m., we sat on the floor facing the dead door, hands wrapped around mugs we didn't drink. The knocking came 3 taps, pause, 3 taps, and then stopped, like we'd disappointed whoever was on the other side by being there, by witnessing. At 11:35 p.m., the nails in the dead door squealed in their wood. The dead door breathed out air that smelled like wet wool and old tobacco and winter coats. "Don't," I said, and the word felt pathetic in my mouth. The seam stopped moving. Morning, we found a brass key on the doormat. Thin, hand-cut. On its bow the part you hold someone had scratched the number 2. We threw it into the river 2 miles away. It was on our doormat again that afternoon, colder than metal should be, with a taste like coins when I picked it up. We haven't opened the dead door. We won't. Some nights we switch which front door we use for a week, just to keep the house guessing. It feels crazy. It feels safe. We do what we can to keep the knocks at a distance. If you made it this far without checking your hallway, I salute you. If you didn't, well, same. Let me know which one got under your skin, and if you want a part 2, I've got more stories that know the sound of your floorboards. Sleep tight if you can. Good night.